Diana is going to introduce maternal mental health for us now, and then we get to move into our story.
Good morning, everyone. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that it's really time, again, for us to keep pushing forward with our efforts to rewrite the societal script that for all women everywhere, pregnancy and the postpartum period are the happiest time in their lives. And, even for women without perinatal depression, new motherhood is tough. It's overwhelming. Women are frequently stressed. They're tired. They're depleted, if they're telling you the truth, right? They're sleep deprived. They worry about doing the right things for their babies. And, we often in our field, we talk about the universal message. We talk about the fact that when we see women who have perinatal illness, we want them to know that they're not alone. We want them to know that they're not to blame. They haven't done anything to cause this. And we want them to know that with proper treatment, that they can get well. And we know how to treat these disorders when they are recognized. We know that about 15 to 20% of women will experience postpartum depression, which most closely really looks like an anxiety disorder. There's actually a recent study that found that more than 80% of the women in their sample who had postpartum depression actually had a history of past depression, and that's really important. That research is important because it helps us to define risk. The only risk factor in this particular study that was associated with the first onset, what they called pure PPD, were experiencing complications during pregnancy or at the time of delivery, which is also important for us because when we are screening and when we're trying to identify risk, we want to be able to know these things, to have this kind of information. One of the most potentially serious symptoms for women with postpartum depression is suicidal ideation. In a very recent study that looked at suicidal ideation across the first 18 months postpartum, found a correlation between suicidal thoughts and childhood maltreatment. Another very important piece of information when we're looking at psychosocial history and trying to screen women and identify for risk. So this is why screening becomes so very important, because much of the time we know how to put things in check before things get too serious, but we have to recognize these illnesses. Over the last 15 years, some of you may know that I have been working very closely with defense counsel over the last 15 years as an expert witness, and I have really been witness to some of the unbelievable heartbreak and tragedies that do occur when postpartum illness goes untreated. Particularly when we're talking about postpartum psychosis. We know that about 1 to 2 out of every 1,000 women who give birth are going to have a psychotic episode in the postpartum period. We know that some of those risk factors include a personal or family history of bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, major depressive disorder with psychotic features. We know that this is a potentially life-threatening medical emergency that requires immediate medical attention. We know that the rates of infanticide for women who are experiencing a psychotic episode are 4%, and women who will take their own lives, the rates are about 5%. And even our clinical understanding of postpartum psychosis is broadening as the years go on, and some of the research now looks at it in a very different kind of a way. We conceptualize it as a manic episode. It is a thought disorder in which women lose touch with reality. Some of the symptoms we see are lack of sleep, tremendous agitation, memory loss, enormous confusion, thought disorganization. Sometimes women hear voices, sometimes they don't. Sometimes these voices are commanding or directing them what to do. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes women have delusions, false beliefs. Sometimes these delusions are terribly bizarre. Sometimes they're not. But they grow in exaggeration and proportion to the point where they do become delusional. We know now in our current research, it's showing that women have episodes of dissociation in the middle of a psychotic episode, where there is actually an interruption in their own conscious awareness. There's memory loss. There is depersonalization, a feeling of things around them not being real. Just last Friday, I was down at the Lynn jail meeting with a woman, and it was the second time that I had seen her. And she said to me, and it was interesting because about 2 days after I saw her the first time, she was put on medication. And when I left her the first time, I thought something is not right here, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So I went back to see her, and I saw her last Friday. And she said to me, and now was on medication, and she said to me, you know, the last time you came in here, I didn't think you were real. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I thought you were like in a movie. She said, I thought I was in a movie, and I thought you were an actor. And I thought that all the guards and the people in the jail, I thought they were actors. I didn't know that that was real. And I said, do you know that I'm real today? And she said, yes. And it was interesting to me that she was now on medication, right? And everything was shifting and changing for her. And now she was able to kind of recall little pieces of what had happened. You know, I've been teaching diagnosis, assessment and diagnosis of perinatal illnesses for over 20 years. But I think one of the things that I've come to understand at a very deep level is that embedded in the signs and symptoms of maternal mental illness are individual stories. They're stories of pain, sometimes they're stories of recovery, sometimes they're stories of repair, despair, oftentimes they're stories of gratitude. But I have come to understand that our stories are the most profound and most powerful tool that we have to increasing awareness. Stories take the facts of a life and infuse them with meaning. And we're going to hear some stories today that I know are going to touch us, heal us, and also help us learn. Thank you.